Hey sis! From coast to coast, we're bridging the gap between the cisgender and transgender community, creating meaningful dialogue and space to learn and grow.
Join us as we connect with our community, break down tough conversations, and get comfortable being better humans. Are you an avid summer reader? Is there a must-read book out there for you? Or a precious past read which you recommend to friends as something that literally changed your life? But wait, there is a caveat. The book has to be an LGBTQ2 plus book. If you don't have any on your current list, whether you're cisgender, trans, straight, gay, or bi, we hope to inspire you this hour. I'm Cyn. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm originally from treaty territory of Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and before then, the traditional territory of Haudenosaunee, Huron, and Wendat, also known as Brampton, Ontario. I don't think I've ever shared that on the show before. I moved to the Maritimes in 2012 with my husband and 3 children. One of them is transgender, and I wholeheartedly attest that it was an LGBTQ fiction novel read in elementary school that altered his life and quite possibly saved it.
I'm Isaac. I use they, he pronouns, and I'm a queer trans social scientist. I reside in Nisahan-Eskik, outside of the Truro area in Mi'kma'ki. Do you know where in Mi'kma'ki you live? And are you interested in learning the name of where you reside? Check out mi'kma'placenames.ca. The link is in the show notes. So, although I don't consider myself to be an avid reader, over the summer months, I do certainly appreciate some good quality queer romance novels, as well as the feeling and smell of a book in my hands. In this episode, we are flipping pages and seeing where our bookmarks are going to land this coming summer. And we have guest Abbey Campbell to help narrate our queer summer reading list and chat with us about the importance of representation between the pages. Abbey uses she, her pronouns and is a passionate and enthusiastic queer youth worker in Chibuktuk. When she isn't reading, playing tabletop role-playing games with her friends, or getting lost in a video game, you will most likely find her spending time with her girlfriend and their service dog, Oliver. Welcome to Hey Sis, Abbey.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So diving into, we'll call this maybe chapter 1, we'd love to hear maybe where you're from, where you call home, and also, most importantly for me, what kind of dog is Oliver?
Yes, so I am from just outside of the city of Chibuktuk, also known as Halifax in Nova Scotia. Born here and raised here, and I plan to stay here for a very, very long time. So Oliver, his full name, Oliver Twist, his nickname, Ollie, his little baby name, Dippus, Mippus, Awi Dawi, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, love it.
He is a black lab, so just a purebred black lab. He's actually American, and he's been a part of my girlfriend's life for the past 3 years now. And I've been very lucky to also have him in my life for the past 2 years and a bit. And yeah, I love him so much.
It's always the perks of being with someone with a dog. Me and my husband, we got our dogs when we were together, but he had a family dog, and I was like, this is now my dog too.
Yeah, your house is full of dog hair, isn't it?
Yes,
you got the big fluffy dogs.
I have 3 dogs. 2 of them are double coated and are very, very fluffy.
Yeah, well, I have to chime in. I have a whippet, and he's fabulous. And it's like, is it Santa's little helper in The Simpsons, or it's always the ugly dog, but they're great runners. And and he came over with us from Ireland. So born in Waterford, up in, I guess, towards where your doggies came from, Isaac, a little bit.
Yeah. All of our dogs are world travelers. My goodness.
Yeah, look at that.
I love that Abbey gave the thumb little wave when you said the smell of books and that.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
We wanted to have you in because you're an avid graphic novel reader, queer graphic novels, and you also do reviews. Is that right? You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I read a lot of different books. I read a lot, primarily just queer books in general, and definitely a lot of queer graphic novels. And I started reviewing books back when I worked at a local bookstore. And sometimes publishers would send books and say, hey, we need some beta readers or ARC readers, as abbreviated advanced reader copy, ARC. in order to get some feedback to see how this book is going to do market-wise, if there needs to be more editing, if there has to be revising, that sort of stuff. I was one of the lucky people to actually receive an arc of Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give. And I was also able to meet Angie Thomas when she came up here with Becky Albertelli and Julie Murphy, who are two other young adult authors. And it was so cool to meet them and also to give feedback to their book, even like to their face, and to hang out and talk about ketchup chips because they don't know what they were. So now I just continue to do that through kind of more of a online path rather than a physical. Like I will write down something and send it to you. I will type something down and send it to you online. So I just continue to review lots of different books. Primarily, those of my choosing are usually always queer books.
Why graphic novels too? I'm just curious.
I find that the avenue of graphic novels can be read by so many different people because it's accessible in a way that sometimes regular fiction novels aren't, because it also gives a visual for folks who may have trouble with kind of the imagining what's happening in the book scene sort of process. It's one thing to read a description of something on a page out of letters, but it's another thing to kind of get out of your space that you're actually in and kind of delve into this world that this author's bringing you into. And graphic novels help, I mean, me for sure, but they also help a lot of other people visualize the scene.
Yeah. And just jumping in there too, kind of to come back to what you were saying about like some folks leaning more towards graphic novels and then other folks leaning more towards, I don't want to use the word like stereotypical like consumption of novels where it's just text, but it kind of reminds me of folks that are like really, really excited for like movie adaptations, because it's not that they don't want to do like the brain work, but sometimes, you know, you would just want to like see and be able to like watch everything unfold or be able to see what the author intended for characters to look like or for what scenes to look like. And I've met a couple of those people, and sometimes those are also the same people that are like, graphic novels are for children, or like, you know, I can't enjoy graphic novels. And I'm like, that's ridiculous because you love movies. And like, it's the same thing, just a different format. And a lot of times books can be a little bit more accessible for people because there's a lot of technology that has to go into watching a movie. It's an interesting format that a lot of people, especially adults, don't consider. And I think now in, you know, 2023, I find there's so many adult graphic novels coming out, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah, it's really nice to see that kind of like resurgence, I suppose, or maybe just kind of a, I don't know, increase, we can say, in like graphic novels, not necessarily only targeted for children. I found working at a bookstore, I'd get a lot of parents saying like, I'm trying to get my kid to start reading because they need it for school and I think it's good for them, but they have such a hard time with traditional books. Do you have any recommendations? That kind of stuff. And usually when I first bring up graphic novels, they're like, oh no, I can't do comic books. That's not reading. And then instead of taking a very kind of offensive approach, it's more of a, oh, well, here's one that really spoke to me and it's actually really deep. And sometimes words escape us in a way that we can't really explain. And sometimes it's best to just even illustrate it, or words don't explain what the illustration is saying in one panel of a graphic novel, for instance, on a page. And then the next page will elaborate on maybe what we're physically seeing on the page. There's definitely a graphic novel out there for everyone, I believe.
I love it. Well, you've got a few books that you're going to take us through. And that's why we thought we would break down this podcast into chapters, because it is generally segmented. And so I thought maybe why don't we kick it off with The Girl from the Sea by Molly Knox Ostertag, that you want to tell us a little bit about that graphic novel?
Absolutely. And I will quickly show it here.
That's a nice cover, actually.
It's gorgeous. And it is fully like color illustrated as well.
Oh, I love that.
It's one of my prized possessions on my shelf. The Girl from the Sea by Molly Knox Ostertag is a sapphic coming-of-age story about a young rural Nova Scotian girl named Morgan who kisses a selkie one night after being saved from drowning in the sea. And to kind of like sum up, like, ooh, would I like this sort of book? What's in it? What should it be expecting? I've kind of written down a, like, if you like this sort of stuff. So if you like folklore, a story on learning to embrace who you are, the sea, cute little art with the actual graphic novel format, adorable sea creatures, and a little bit of environmentalism, I think that this book would be for you. As well as if you are from Nova Scotia, it's also just a fun read. You see some references from a few rural places, and it also mentions Jabuktuk, also known as Halifax, inside the book as well.
What if you just always wanted to know what it's like to kiss a selkie? I mean, like, is it dangerous? I mean, do they, like, what happens? What's it like?
I guess you'll have to read it to find out. Yes, there was definitely a lot of care that went into why the author chose this setting, this place, and also the different folklore that she put into it. A little back story, I suppose, on the author. So Molly Knox Ostertag is the wife of N.D. Stevenson, who's also the creator and producer and showrunner of the new She-Ra, which is one of my favorite shows. Yeah. So they are a married couple. They're wonderful together. And they both have come to Nova Scotia over, countless summers because they have family that lives here. And I believe that they have moved away now, but they still come back because they love coming up to Nova Scotia, even though they're American. So they have physically been in this space. They have explored the different cultural significance of, typical Nova Scotian stuff, whether it's like the lobster traps that are everywhere, sometimes littered around rural Nova Scotia, to, some of the environmentalism crises that we face here. There was a lot of care and thought and passion that went into making this graphic novel, which it makes me so happy as not only a fan of these two partners together, but also as a queer girl from Nova Scotia. Like it's a place that I know deep in my heart. And it's also an identity that I feel and know also deep in my heart. And it's seeing this story. If I had this when I was like their age, because this is more of a kind of, I like to call it a middle grade. So I would say, 10 to 14 maybe is the ideal, but anyone can read it really.
I think also trying to get into your head sometime of your kids and everything. I like to actually read like YA and that sometimes. So you have me sold. I will put that on my summer reading list.
Yeah.
And is a graphic novel, like, is it just a single novel or is it part of a series?
In the genre in general, it would depend. So for The Girl from the Sea, it's just a one standalone. So it's a one and go. You're not going to have to buy more series for it.
Yep.
Oh, that sounds awesome. So we'll have to put that one on the list there.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And I will like to mention, hopefully, that I have provided some content warnings on the books that I'm going to be mentioning. And I believe that they're going to be in the show notes. So before you pick them up, if you want to take a look at the content warnings, see if you're going to be all good and safe reading these books, go for it.
Yeah. And maybe what we'll do just for ease of access and accessibility, maybe we'll put everything into maybe like a Google Doc so that folks can easily like Control F if there's any sort of, items that might be triggering for some folks, that they can easily do that search. But yeah, so jumping in maybe to chapter 2, I feel like I need some I need a soundboard here. Oh yeah.
Sound effects.
So going on to the next book and, to try and link it afterwards, if possible, to the past, let's talk about why books like these are important and, why are we talking about queer novels? Why the emphasis on queer novels? And then also to, link it to history and what has happened in the past in terms of eliminating novels and unfortunately what's happening today.
Yeah. It's really disheartening and discouraging to even like just open up Twitter every morning. There's some sort of news that is rough to read. However, I think it's still important to know what is going on so that we can actively fight against it and combat it.
Saying it's unfortunate is very much of like a disservice of what is actually going on in the world, but that's the best word that I can think of on the top of my head, keeping things a little PG.
Yeah.
But you said it even yourself just moments ago, and I definitely feel the same way as a trans person, is that holy smokes, I wish I had these stories when I was younger. Like when I was
Yes.
younger, I don't even know. Like I don't even think there was anything really that I could like relate to. And I mean, I was during these peak ages in like 2006, 2008. Like that's not that long ago. Other than like me reading stories and I'm like, the authors know what they're doing. Those characters are definitely gay or like queer or
Yeah.
whatever, but like it wasn't, nothing was actually like written down. It's incredible that suddenly, well, not so suddenly, because this is, folks have been pushing for more better representation in media and literature forever. But now in recent years, because we are finally getting proper representation, we are also getting a lot of pushback
Yeah.
in the form of legislature and bills and laws and yay.
Oh God.
Yeah, I know. It's like one of those things that I know people that like know or have done like a workshop with me has heard me go on about the book George, which has now been renamed to Melissa's story, about a trans girl who was always Melissa, but the author had entitled it George originally. And just how like having a book like that gave language to a child who was grappling with these feelings, did not make a child anything that they weren't already, but validated them.
Yeah.
And I had a copy of this one, which is actually similar to George, probably the same age range, but it's about a trans boy. And it's called The Other Boy by M.G. Hennessy. And after my kiddo transitioned, I had found this book. They had heard George, but I wanted to find one that had a trans boy in it. And so I got it and I read it myself and then I gave it to him. And I loved it so much because it was, you learn so much from it. And I know it's just one story in that, but they really loved it and was surprised if there was a book out there like that. Not a graphic novel, but
I always say, little side tangent, I always say, I don't care how folks read, I care that you read. Whether it's audiobooks, whether it's comic books, graphic novels, traditional reading, whether you can only read quick little novellas, or whether you're reading a children's picture book to a Webster's dictionary. I don't care how you read. You are reading, and I think that is wonderful. And there's many different avenues to read. I even kind of count TV shows and movies and that kind of media almost as reading, just to make it kind of more accessible, because I sort of think of reading more as storytelling or story consuming, I suppose.
Hey Sis is all about connecting communities, and thanks to support from TD Bank Group, here is this episode's Connected Community Moment.
Now that you've heard some of our favorite queer reads, we want to hear from you. Is there a thrilling action novel with a lesbian protagonist that stole your heart? What about a collection of poetry and prose written by transgender artists? No matter what type of story it is, we want to know what's top of mind when you think of queer literature. Jump over to our Facebook and Instagram, follow us, subscribe to the Hey Sis podcast, and comment on our posts to let us know what your top picks are. At the end of June, we will randomly draw one winner to receive a $25 gift card to one of our favorite local queer bookstores, Venus Envy. And yes, they do ship worldwide. We can't wait to explore your faves. This has been a Hey Sis and TD Bank Group Connected Communities moment, because inclusion matters. So yeah, jumping back to chapter 2, as we're talking about the past, present, moving into the future, one of the novels you have to share with us today is a sci-fi with forbidden love and time travel. So maybe take us there with you.
Absolutely. I also have a physical copy of this book. So this is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El Motar and Max Gladstone. So it's written by two authors.
This is How You Lose the Time War. Okay, tell us about this book.
So this is basically about two time traveling agents from warring futures working their way through the past, and they begin to exchange letters, which is how the book is actually formatted. It's through writing like letters to one back to the other, to the other, to the other. And they fall in love. So if you like a enemies to lovers, forbidden love, sapphic yearning, time travel, thinking about the innate pain and humiliation of desire, creative writing styles, and probably also crying, because I did a lot of that, you will really like this book. I will say that it is definitely a adult book, not in the themes of what we traditionally think as a adult book, but more in the themes of war. It's about, time travel in the sense of there's past wars, there's future wars, all that fun stuff. So I just want to give content warnings for this one because there's either mentioning, not a specific actual depicting of self-harm, descriptions of, bodies, dead bodies, some blood drinking, murder, like some heavy stuff.
It's an adult then, an adult graphic.
Yes. Yeah. And again, it's told through writing letters back and forth to each other. So it's not as if you're getting a play-by-play of these things happening.
Mhm.
It's more of a mentioning. And I like to keep most of this plot very hidden, or at least I don't talk too much about the plot, because I find it's best to go in with very little to expect
An
out
open
of it.
mind.
Yes, an open mind.
I just wanted to chime in too as well. Also, mostly to get both of your thoughts as you're talking about kind of different writing styles, and we chatted a bit about poetry and like the different types of literature that exists. But I don't know if maybe I'm the only person. Probably not, but I love books that have like really creative like pages, like in terms of like textures. I'm the person that was like obsessing with like the smells earlier, so that's probably not a surprise that I also like the textures, but like that's why I love physical books so much. So like I find often with the like letter writing style, I can't remember the book off the top of my head, but it was written in the style of also letters sending back and forth between individuals, and how they had it written. Now, mind you, a lot of cases for this in terms of accessibility, it's not the easiest to read, but just visually, it looked like someone actually handwriting notes, and then the leather, like the pages were kind of like worn out and like had almost like coffee stains and stuff on them. So it really felt like someone just, binded together a bunch of letters. So there's some really creative ways that people have like done that.
Can you show us just a quick peek inside this book, and we can maybe describe it? Because I'm curious as to what it would look like as well.
Absolutely. Just making sure
it's not a giveaway scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A spoiler alert.
Yeah. This is good. So.
Oh yeah. So okay.
There we go.
Yeah. So it's like standard pages, and then it has your kind of stereotypical like sign off and signature, and then like PS.
Yes. And the sign-offs, they change and they add like a deeper meaning to the context of the story. Makes my heart burst. Yeah. And it's very, I don't know, I guess it's a very unique story in the sense of like, I mentioned in the If You Like This, thinking about like the innate pain and kind of humiliation of desire sometimes. And it's not a good nor bad thing. I wanted to include that to say like, sometimes like loving someone so much can, feel humiliating sometimes because you're so head over heels, especially if it's like an enemies to lovers sort of forbidden love. Like there's all these other contexts that make it so high risk and deep, I suppose you can say. It's very good. I really love it.
Oh, that sounds great. And I think, we were talking about before, just about like the past and the present and the importance of this storytelling, and the idea of like this being like you're going back in time, and it's a soon to be queer couple because they haven't met in the beginning. Just having these books out there is so important. As we were preparing to record this, a news article had popped up just like yesterday or the day before on the Washington Post about objection to sexual LGBTQ content propels spike in book challenges. And so, when we look back to, I think I had mentioned to Isaac, it was like May 6, 1933. So 90 years ago was like that first like the big book burning in Nazi Germany, which was targeted at LGBT books along with un-German books. But, 90 years down the road, and, the headlines are scary, they're kind of like, the more we change, the more we stay the same. And so I do think that this, surgence in LGBTQ2 plus fiction, nonfiction, graphic novels, all of that is so great. And, no matter how hard I think people try to ban it, it's not going to go away. It'll just, it'll make them more sought after, hopefully.
Yeah. And it's definitely an experience that's being felt, in particular in the United States right now. I think it was Florida, God love Florida, that there was a teacher that showed a movie that it didn't directly have a queer character, but like there was a character with like a same-sex attraction, or that was mentioned maybe briefly once. I can't remember the movie name. It was relatively new. And now she is like facing jail time for showing a movie to like her class, like just as like this is a rated G movie. It's a Disney movie, I'm pretty sure. Or Pixar.
I heard that story. Yeah.
And it's just like, come on, people.
Yeah.
Like, we're really, reaching that grass here.
Yeah. And it's happening right here in Canada too, like Brandon, Manitoba, New Brunswick. And then, with drag queen story times, I think there's one being organized in the Valley. And some of the comments on Facebook are like, it's a call to arms, come out. It's almost like grab your pitchforks. People don't let, these lovely dressed, beautiful queens come and read to children and make them happy. And, it's just, it's really, and it's misinformation. I think it's people that are being so fueled by this sort of misinformation out there. If you maybe picked up a book or two and actually, took a look at it first and had a read of it, you'd actually probably, a lot of it would resonate with you, whether, you're cisgender or whether you're queer. Just like before these kinds of books were out there, I imagine as a queer person, you could pick up a book and read it and still it could resonate with you, right? I think we find what we need from the stories that we read.
When I was younger, I'd read, and like in school, I'd read about countless characters that are straight and cis, and I watched movies. It was the norm. I wasn't being pressured into being straight or cis. No one's forcing me. Reading these sort of stories didn't make me a certain way. It's so weird when folks say like, oh, if we let children read about gay representation, it's going to turn them gay. Like, what? Yeah. That's not how this works.
No. And as Emma actually from our office had said the other week, we were talking about this, and she said, look, it's shown from conversion therapy that you can't make somebody not gay. So you can't make somebody gay. Like, it's just, I said it yesterday. I was doing a reading of The Pink Balloon, my children's inclusive school book, to elementary school classes. And we were talking about, how, the innate ability to know if you're left-handed or right-handed. How do you know? You just know, and somebody can force you and make you right-handed, but it doesn't mean that you're right-handed. It doesn't mean it's comfortable. It means that you can do it. You can, you can do it and get away with it. So,
well, and even on that same train of thought too, there's all that like data coming out being like, there's so many like trans or queer people or whatever. And then there's also, someone posted on Twitter. It was like, there's the same parallels of that with like, people now comfortably identifying that they're like left-handed. And like, because it used to be exactly that you have to write with your right hand, you have to do it. That's the normal thing to do. Stigma. A very, very minor comparison in the grand scheme of things, but just to, help connect the dots to folks who may not have thought of these things, right? Like this is a normal conversation that we're having in today's world, that people are able to be left-handed. People are the way that they are. Let them live their life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's not like one thing that made them left-handed, like, oh, it's a failure on my part.
Failed as a parent.
Oh, no. I should have eaten more ice cream when I was pregnant.
Yeah.
What's happening? Well, let's dive into this memoir now. So we've had a sci-fi, and now we've got a memoir graphic novel called Us by Sarah Solar. And this one is not even out yet. So but you've had a sneak read of it?
Yes. So the original language that it's in is Spanish. However, the English translation is going to be coming out on July 25th.
This summer. So an August
Yes.
read, maybe. Tell us a little bit about what you liked about it and about it.
Yeah. So again, this is a graphic novel that is a memoir about Sarah Solar and Sarah Solar's wife, Diana. It's about their love story, and Sarah illustrates their shared past as a heteronormative couple and guides the reader through the ups and downs of coming out and accepting yourself. So for Sarah, it was finding out that she was bi. And for Diana, it was finding out that she's trans. And if you like realistic depictions of relationships, like the ups and downs, sometimes the hardships and the absolute funny little moments or the joy, if you love humor, if you love reading about characters who embrace who they are and who their loved ones are, if you love expressive art, if you love communication between characters, if you love nerdy things and also general shenanigans, I think you're going to absolutely adore this book. It is so full of heart, and it is also very, like, it knows about what time it's written in, as we were just talking about with everything happening across the world, especially in America, for instance. It also touches on like the world of graphic novel publishing and, you know, is this story actually gonna take off the ground with all of these new restrictions that are happening? Is it better to stay safe rather than be who you are? It is a very fun book and a very important book as well, because while it still has humor, it also has its truth-hitting moments, and it's a very good balance. The illustrator, who is also the author, Sarah, she made the colors of all the book different shades of the trans flag. So it's just like that little, like one of those little intricate ways of showing pride, showing like this is the essence of the book, and like embracing her wife in who she is. And it's so good.
I love that. I love that it's written from her own experiences.
I think it'd be a whole other level actually to kind of try and do a graphic novel, to write it and then illustrate it, because you're illustrating, you're like that. I think that sounds fabulous. And when you read it, Abby, then it wasn't the Spanish copy, was it? Did you have an English copy or?
I had the English translation. So I read it and I was able to send feedback of it, and it was a lot of positive feedback, honestly. And I'm very excited for the English translation to be released, because I'm grabbing that so fast and I'm going to throw it at all of my friends. Gently throw it.
Yeah. Birthdays, Christmas, any holidays this year. This is what you're getting from Abby. A good gift.
I just love that you put general shenanigans in too, just because that word is in there. I'm like, okay, I've got to pick that one up too. So you'll have to remind me then when you're going to get your copy. I will come and get a copy with you. Is it a lot of pictures with little words per page, or is there like, what would be the balance of like pictures to words per page?
There's a really good balance between the art and also the lettering, I suppose I can say, because it's not like a generated text. It's the author like wrote out every word, but it is legible. It's not hard to read. It's like an accessible font almost. And there's also sometimes where the author will add like a certain emphasis to a word in an artistic way that, you know, it signifies the importance of it. And then they'll go on to maybe draw like a very dramatic, angry face of passion.
My head just went to Batman and Robin cartoons when they go pow, bang.
Yeah.
The
expressive.
And that's like the background of the traditional like comic and graphic novel industry coming out. And like that just shows the history and how you can even make it inclusive or make it your own. And as, you know, time evolves, we do too, and stories evolve.
I love it. So let's go into the final chapter of your next wish list book. You've done a high fantasy, Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. Let's hear about this one and why it's on your wish list.
Absolutely. So A Day of Fallen Night is actually very popular right now, especially in the sort of subcategory of sapphic queer literature, especially on something called like Book Talk, which is just TikTok where folks talk about books. And this is a brick of a book, let me tell you.
Holy smokes.
I was
yeah.
going to say, like, how many pages is that?
Nearly 900 pages.
Woohoo.
Wow.
Okay.
So this book is the standalone prequel to Samantha Shannon's first book in this sort of world or series, which is A Priory of the Orange Tree, which is also a brick.
Easy way to fill up a shelf then.
Oh, yes. Both of these side by side are just
they're stunning. Yeah,
so
really nice.
So again, it's the standalone prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree, and it's set just shy of 5 centuries before The Priory of the Orange Tree, and covers the period known as the Great Sorrow. So if you like, again, sapphic love, I read a lot of sapphic love, intricate and immersive world building, and I mean that in every essence. The description and the art, the writing style, it is so immaculate, and it just breathes life whenever you read it. It's so good. If you like queendoms, if you like diverse, strong, and emotionally complex women with swords, I think you'd like this book. And if you also like political theater and dragons, because dragons make everything better.
Yes.
It's true. It is true. For listeners that maybe like when you're describing sapphic, do you want to just dive a little bit deeper if for somebody, that maybe is not familiar with that description?
I like to describe sapphic as it's another way to sort of saying like women love women, or women who love non-binary folks. It's basically just a way to say that these women are in relationships that are primarily between 2 women, or more femme presenting, or 1 woman, 1 non-binary person. Strictly just saying lesbian relationship, it kind of brings into the context that one of them could be bi and one of them could be lesbian, or both of them could be bi, or both of them could be pan, or one, or so on and so forth. It's a way to describe more of a relationship rather than a specific identity.
It kind of reminds me of like the bisexual versus pansexual thing. Like people are like helping to create new language to describe how people are feeling, even though a lot of probably the definitions are very similar. Like, for instance, like a lot of people used to make the statement that like saying you're bisexual is transphobic, which isn't the case. And identifying as lesbian doesn't make you transphobic by any degree either. I love your description that like sapphic is just like a softer way of like describing it, and it helps create that more community essence, which is also kind of how I feel about like being pansexual, is that there's like another community with that.
It's definitely something that is ever evolving, as most language is. As someone who identifies as a lesbian, I also embrace the term sapphic, just because in some cases it's easier to explain complex like gender identities that are still included in like my romantic and sexual attractions to folks. My girlfriend, for example, she uses she, they pronouns, isn't necessarily non-binary, but also isn't necessarily a binary woman. So I describe us as a sapphic relationship. I would also still describe us as a lesbian relationship. It could be difficult because of, again, you were saying like a lot of people have these preconceived notions that all lesbians are transphobic or all bi people are just blah, 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 which is not the case whatsoever. It's just stigma.
It's very important for people to talk about, though, because I think, like, as Cyn said, I think a lot of folks have these questions that they hear these words, or like, if someone says this is a sapphic centered space, if I don't necessarily identify with that, like, is that still a space that works? I'm not talking about me directly, but for individuals who identify as non-binary, I mean, which is myself, but for individuals who identify as non-binary, if they're like, it's a sapphic centered space, like, is that a space for me? Is that where I should feel comfortable? And to each their own,
Yeah. I mean, it's good to have these conversations. And, the first time I had met, I was at an event and there was a couple there that was together, a lesbian couple, and how they would self-describe. And when I was talking to them about gender identity and what we do and like the experiences and that, they were like, it was a light bulb moment too. They're like, oh, we didn't really know about the trans experience, like in that the gender identity and how, but we never really asked about it. So, even within community, there's still always opportunity to learn and grow.
Yeah. And there's still, like discrimination and such within the community, or biases towards certain identities, or, how people talk. But the beauty of having not necessarily new language, but different language, is that people are able to find what best represents themselves. If we're making more words within the community, doesn't mean there's less community for other people. It just means that there's safer spaces for people who need that.
That is an excellent way of
That'll be
putting
my quote of the day. That's all you're getting.
Yes.
Good stuff. Oh, well, I've really, I've enjoyed hearing about these books, and I think we're probably getting short on time to dive into your complete wish list. No, but we could run through some of your wish lists that might be, might go onto other people's lists for the summer, as we're approaching into warmer weather shortly.
Yeah, and we'll also make sure to include the full wish list in the Google Doc, or wherever this full wish list will live, because I know I have some additions too as well.
I will just mention the one book that I'm looking forward to reading over the summer that is on like the tippy top. I want to read it so soon. It is a contemporary young adult novel called Ender and Santi Were Here by Johnny Garza Villa. And to describe it, it's kind of a Aristotle and Dante meets The Hate You Give meets The Sun Is Also Star. All of those are young adult books, by the way. So this is like a stunning YA contemporary love story about a Mexican-American non-binary teen who falls in love with an undocumented Mexican bisexual boy. So if you like supportive family members, Latinx representation, urban art, there's lots of fun graffiti art moments apparently, and I'm just excited for it. Good food. There's lots of food description and character-driven stories. So not necessarily plot, but more like focused on the characters. You will love this book. Again, content warnings are going to be in the show notes for this one.
Thank you. That sounds great. Urban art and good food. I'm there.
Yeah, already sold.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much, Abbey, for joining us today. It's been super exciting. And for me that, it's hard to get me into a book, but every one that you've said here, I'm going to write down. I'm going to go out and search them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As I said, I don't necessarily identify as an avid reader, but some good queer novels, love it. Love it. Need more lists like this. Yeah. But
thank you so much for having me. It was a blast.
Yes, thank you so much. It was lovely learning, about not only your personal experiences, but also, your journey as a reviewer, or how would you identify it? Like
just like book reviewer, I suppose. It's like a little side gig that I don't necessarily get paid. I just get sent a book sometimes and then I review it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, you get paid in the enjoyment of reading. So there you go.
Heck yeah.
But thank you so much, Abbey, for joining us today. It was a real pleasure.
The last episode of the season will be coming up next in a few weeks, and then we'll be breaking for the summer. So I don't know, maybe if any of you do pick up some of these books that Abbey's recommended, we would love to hear from you in September on what you thought. That's all the time we have today, folks. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Hey Sis.
The conversation doesn't have to stop here, though. If you would like to get in touch with us to ask us a question or share your story on a future episode, you can email us at connect@simplygoodform.com or visit us on our website at www.heysis.com.